Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the second part of ranking the Thomas seasons. We are doing season 2 today, and by far better season. It's a far superior season to season 1. If you saw my season 1 episode ranking, I am not a fan of season 1. I think it's really boring, to say the least. There's only a few episodes I really enjoy. But season 2 has a lot of bangers. It has a lot of iconic episodes, and I'm really excited to get down to it. So, yeah. If you guys don't know how my ranking system works, essentially, I will go through the episodes in chronological order and give a number on where I rank them. So instead of a classic worst to best, like going, let's say if I have, like, referencing season 1, if I had, or like, Better Late, sorry, not Better Late for Never, Big Day for Thomas at number 26, it wouldn't be at the bottom of my list because I'm going in chronological order. If that makes any sense, you'll see what I'm ranking. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into the ranking. We are starting with Thomas Percy and McColl, and this is a their episode. It's not a very interesting episode to me. I have it ranked at number 24. Once again, another example of a debut episode of a season not being ranked very high for me. Might become a trend, you never know. But nothing really happens in this episode, at least for me. I don't really care. I think it's sped up. Not necessarily like sped up, but like it feels rushed. The plot feels rushed. The apology from fuck, I don't remember who. I I literally don't remember a lot of the episode, but it just felt rushed. It just doesn't seem very inspired. At least for me personally, I feel like if they were to maybe spend a little more time on this episode, or at least replace it with an episode, I don't know, like The Missing Coach, or maybe if they adapted maybe like Drip Tank or another or if they adapted another like actually good story from the Railway series, then I feel like the debut episode for the season would have been more enjoyable. Now we get to A Cow on the Line, or Cows. Very inspired title. It's better. It's way better. I have it at number 18. Good episode. I will say there are a few episodes I don't like in season 2. Like, way less episodes I dislike than season 1. Cows is it's a decent episode. I love the concept. I love the dialogue between Henry and Gordon, and it just feels inspired. I really enjoy the episode, and I love the concept of a mother being lost or being, I guess, separated from her calf, and that's the only reason why her why she's like refusing to move away from the tracks. It just has a lot of inspiration, and I love the banter. Not really banter. I love how it's not even banter at all. I don't know what I'm saying. Edward somehow found out, like he knew that Gordon and Henry, the big strong engines, who talk a lot of shit, refused to, cross the bridge. I don't know. You guys know what I'm saying, but it is by far a better episode than Thomas Percy and Nicole will ever be. So let's go on to the next one, shall we? The third episode released for season 2 was Birdie's Chase. Oh boy, it's not a good episode. Not it's not it's not a terrible episode. I have it ranked at number 22. It's decent. I like the chase scenes, but everything else in between I'm not a fan of. It could have been a lot better. But there is some good stuff about, Edward in this season, and that his crew are actually named. I know one of his crew members is named Charlie. I don't remember the other crew member's name. so I might get a little bit of flack for that. I don't know. Yeah, it's a decent episode. Not exactly the craziest thing ever, so I don't really have a lot to say on it. Number 22 for me. Now we get to Saved from Scrap. This is another decent episode. It's where Trevor is introduced and Edward saves him by recommending him, or by going to the vicar and saying, "Hey, you could buy this guy, do what you gotta do, make some money or whatnot." But yeah, I love Trevor. He's definitely a far better road vehicle than Terrence. Oh god, I don't like Terrence. If you saw my season 1 ranking, you'd know where I rank Terrence and his episode. Um, just not a fan of it. Not a fan of Terrence. Sorry, I'm a bit of a fan of this episode, but it's an all right episode. Nothing too crazy. Now we move on to Old Iron and the first episode in my top 10. It's my number 8 episode, and it wouldn't be a ranking of mine if a James episode isn't in my top 10. Because James is my favorite character. So yeah, I love everything about this episode. I think it's fantastic. Definitely, I feel like it might be lower than what some people would rank it, or it might be a little higher. I don't know personally. I haven't watched a lot of season 2 rankings, but for me, it's number 8. I think it's phenomenal. And to be honest, when I was watching season 2 for the ranking, I never noticed that the Sodor Shipping Company was in the background of the episode, at least in some parts of it. I never noticed that. I always thought it was like at least a season 5 onwards thing. I didn't know that season 2 had it. So, um, that's just something I wanted to point out. But I love the chase scene, and I love the concept of, you know, we get this is like a better example of an engine having their controls messed with, because for some reason a few more episodes in the season deal with messed up controls. I don't know why that was a common theme, but I don't know. I don't write the episodes, people. But I love Edward in this episode. I love James in this episode, and I just love everything about it. I love the sequence of the driver trying to get the rope around the buffer, and eventually he does, and I love that. It's like I guess like a good comparison would be like pre Rusty in the Boulder, because Rusty in the Boulder is like an Indiana Jones style Thomas episode, but I feel like that sequence in Old Iron is like sort of an Indiana Jones style, kind of like maybe like a cowboy esque kind of thing with the lasso or rope and whatnot. I personally love it. I think it's a phenomenal episode, and number 8 for me. Now we get to Thomas and Trevor, or I think a new friend for Thomas is the other name for it. I don't know. I don't like this episode. It's very low. It's low ranked for me. It's number 25. It's again, I don't like this episode. I'm not a big fan of Thomas, as you already know. His character fluctuates throughout the classic series, but this episode, I've just never been a fan of it. And like the flaws in the episode, every time I go to watch it, they become more and more prominent. Like, why are there long pauses in between dialogues from different characters? Why are why aren't the voices for characters lined up with the shots? And it just the episode is very flawed. I never got the episode. I never enjoyed it. It's very boring. This is like the worst episode we've covered so far. and that sucks because the next two episodes I really, really enjoy. So number 25 for me. Now we have Percy and the Signal. I am an avid fan of this episode. I love it. This is my number 9. This is such a good classic episode. I love how Percy just messes with the big engines and then they get him back. You know, karma bites you in the ass. And I love how Percy talks like, "Oh, I know so much about everything. I know so much about signals. I don't know what a backing signal is, but I know what it is." This is essentially what he's saying. And I think it's a phenomenal episode. It's really, really good. I've always been a fan of the actual backing signal sequence where Percy thinks he knows what happens and then he thinks he can escape it, but Gordon saw the entire thing. I love it. It's so fun. It's just a slice of life kind of thing, I guess. Like a simple prank kind of episode, but I honestly really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite episodes so far. I mean, besides Old Iron. But yeah, I just love this episode all around. Number 9 for me. Now we get to Duck Takes Charge. Another introduction episode for a new character. If anybody knows me, I'm a Great Western fanatic. I love the Great Western so much. Duck is one of my favorite characters. He's in my top 10 for sure, along with Oliver. So if I ever do a top 10 characters list, spoiler, they're both in there. um, but Duck Takes Charge is my number 10 episode of season 2. I think it's phenomenal. I love the way he was introduced, and I love the way he he sort of melts in. He perfectly fits within Sodor's fleet at the time, and I love it. He doesn't take shit from anybody, which I think is really the first, at least one of the first characters to do so. He doesn't have a he doesn't have that much of a big head. He is, you know, of course, the one who always says, I'm Great Western and this that, but he shows a lot of respect to those who show him respect, and if you don't show him respect, chances are then he will call you out or make a little bit of a spectacle about it. I don't know, but I just love the way he handles the whole shed situation with Percy, and I don't know. I just love that sequence. He is a perfect fit for the Steam team, in my opinion, and I love the way he was introduced. I feel like if he were introduced later in the show, maybe like around like between season 3 and maybe 8 or 9, give or take, I feel like his character wouldn't work well. But season 2 is like a perfect fit for him, and I quite enjoy him a lot. Duck Takes Charge is my number 10 episode. I love it. Now we get to another episode where I don't really enjoy. It is Percy Proves a Point. It is where we meet Harold the Helicopter for the first time, and the whole famous race scene between Percy and Harold. I've never been a fan of it. It's my number 23. It's definitely it's definitely a perfect stand-in for it's like at the perfect spot between Birdie's chase and Thomas Percy and McCall. It's like the perfect trilogy, I guess, of bad episodes. Until we get to the pretty obvious number 26. We'll get there. I've I've never been a fan. It's not really, if it were to come on, I would skip it. But if there weren't any other Thomas episodes on, like let's say if I was watching like actual TV and this episode pops on, I'll watch it. Doesn't mean I'll enjoy it. And same thing if I'm going through a marathon of like, if I'm going through a Thomas marathon, this isn't an episode I will necessarily skip, but I won't really keep my eyes on it or enjoy watching it. It's only there for the sake of filling out season 2. It's just filler for me, honestly. Never been a fan of it. I love Harold, and boy howdy, I love Harold. Will When we get to the later seasons, namely season 5, you'll see how much I love Harold. But right now, this episode is number 23 for a reason. I think it's boring. and not very inspired. Now we get to The Runaway, which was actually kind of high on my list when I was starting, but then it fell to number 20. And looking at my list, it's it's a it's like the start of the decent episodes. It's like the bottom of the decent episodes. I think there's an episode who does messed up controls better, and for some reason they did it with Thomas twice, but Thomas, I guess, went to the works, and you know something happened with his brakes. They weren't braking in time. He was overshooting the platform, and he literally stopped at the platform before the whole runaway sequence, and then somehow went on his own. And I never understood why they didn't change Henry's face for the runaway scene. Like a shocked face would have probably made the episode a little better, because Henry just smiled at him, leaving without the passengers and whatnot. I don't know. I've just never really been a big fan of the episode. It's definitely at the bottom of the decent episodes for me, and there's not really much to say about it otherwise. So, yeah. Now we have Percy Takes the Plunge. Major fan of this episode. This is the best episode we've covered so far. This is my number 7 episode of season 2. I've always been a fan of this episode. I think it's a perfect Percy episode. It's one of the perfect Percy episodes, at least in these earlier seasons. I find it so enjoyable. It's just so nice to watch. Just everything about it. I love the whole harbor scene, and I love the sequence with Percy, actively going into the water. It's just so nice. I can't really say anything else about it, or else I'll praise it too much. But I think the whole sets, they look supreme in this episode. I don't know what it is, but the sets really make this episode stand out. The whole banter between Henry and Percy in the beginning was really nice, though I don't understand why. Like, when I was younger, I always thought that Bill and Ben were already characters, like established characters in the show, because at that point I've never seen the Diesel when I was really young. I thought they were established characters, and when they weren't really named, I was a little confused. It's a great episode nonetheless. I'm really happy with my ranking on it. So, yeah, 7 for me. Now we get to the infamous Duck and Diesel trilogy, and I have opinions on it. Starting with Pop Goes the Diesel, it is my number 17. Might catch some flack for this. There are just episodes I find better. Let me explain. I love this episode. Starting from 17, going all the way to my number 1. At least 17 through, I don't know. But Pop Goes the Diesel is a good episode. I love it. I know Safe from Scrap I said was alright. I like it too. Then again, Pop Goes the Diesel and Safe from Scrap could honestly switch around for me. But I love Diesel as a character. I love how he's sort of the first major antagonist that we've had. And I love his contrast with Duck. And I do have an opinion on the trilogy factor of the trilogy, so believe me, we'll get to it when we get to it. So it's a good episode. I love Diesel's introduction. I love his conniving attitude straight from the get-go. I think he's a perfect sort of antagonist, if you want to call him an antagonist, sort of enemy of the Steam team. I love it. I just love the way he was introduced. He's so snarky and conniving. He's almost like a mobster, he's almost like a New York mobster. I love the way he was introduced. And, he could have worked for the mob, he could have worked for the mob, okay, I'll stop. But, yeah, I just love the way he was introduced. It's an alright episode. I won't go as far as to say that I love it. I definitely like it. It's definitely better than fucking, the first episode, fucking, Thomas and Trevor. But yeah. Diesel's Devious Deed, or Dirty Work, as I'll be referring it to when I edit, is next. Better. Way better than Pop Goes the Diesel. It is my number 15. So not much higher, but definitely better. I love the whole, like I said, when he's conniving, he's conniving. He tricks the trucks into spreading lies, and it's like the perfect episode for framing an engine. And I don't know. I've always been a fan of this episode, but not like an avid fan. I just think it's a fine episode. You know, I love the whole Diesel coming home and the engine's blocking him in. Love that concept. But otherwise, it's a fine episode. And then Duck gets sent away at the end. You know, goes to Edward Station, and of course we have a close shave that follows. Fantastic episode. This is my number 5. Duck is a phenomenal character, as I've already mentioned. He is, you know, in my top 10. And, you know, this episode is phenomenal. Definitely way better than the other 2 episodes. But I love his dynamic with Edward. You don't really see that a whole lot. Duck and Edward, I don't think, have really interacted since Close Shave, or at least since season 2. Just everything about it. I love the way they work together, and I love the infamous breakaway sequence, and where he goes to the barbershop. Obviously, crashes into the barbershop, gets a nice gets a beard of shaving cream. Phenomenal. I love it. So iconic. But the end is sort of what is keeping it out of my top 3. Where Sir Topham Hatt said that he didn't believe Diesel at all anyway. So, okay, so I'll go ahead and bring this up now. So, the Duck and Diesel trilogy, I know some people have said that they wanted that it should have been a tetralogy, you know, where it was 4 episodes instead of 3. Because, you know, people's reasoning is Topham saying that there should have been an episode, you know, going in detail about what Diesel did to get him sent away. But I'm gonna take a stand with Tug here, you know, with Unlucky Tug and what he said. I know, oh my god, I'm gonna get pitchforks, you know, thrown at me because I agree with Tug over something. Oh my god, just let me explain. You know, with Nick, or Tug, what he said is that Diesel is a 1 in a million Diesel. You know, or however he described it, he is a nameless Diesel. He's nothing. There was nearly 1,000 Class 08s built, and he's just one of the 1,000. He's not special. Granted, I know he was talking about the Railway series with this, but I'm comparing it to the TV series here. I know the whole Diesel thing is more serious in the TVS, but in the Railway series, he didn't really have a lot to do. So my stand is pretty much the same, but for the TV series. He's not really a special engine. Same thing goes for Duck. He is a very, like, his class was, I believe, the most produced tank engine. Seeing an episode with Diesel getting sent away wouldn't make sense for me, at least, because he is really a nothing engine. There were so many of him built. I just think it would be pointless to get an episode of a nothing character at this point in time, when all he is just another face in the crowd. So that's my reasoning as to that whole debacle. So yeah. Now we get to the infamous Better Late Than Never. You're damn right. This is my number 26. This episode is not good. It's pointless. This is a real drag to get through, and I will admit I didn't keep my eyes on it. It's so bad. It's not even bad. It's just there. It makes no sense. It's so confusing. It's a real drag to get through. I don't know. I really don't know how to describe it. What is the whole plot exactly? I've never understood that. And like, one of the opening shots of the episode is 20 seconds long. It shouldn't be 20 seconds long. Granted, I know one of the shots in Old Iron where James is on the turntable is pretty long, but that episode is good. It actually has purpose. What does this episode have? You know, this episode doesn't have purpose at all. So I don't understand why it's even in here to begin with. It's just not a good episode. 26, dead last. On the contrary, we have Breakvan, the infamous episode that introduces the Scottish twins Donald and Douglas. Phenomenal episode. This is my number 4. I've always been a fan of this, and Donald and Douglas are phenomenal characters. I love them. It's a shame that they didn't really get a whole lot of attention later on. I don't think, the hit era didn't really do anything with them. I don't think they did anything with them, period. I think the last time we got like an actual Donald and Douglas episode was Bad Day at Castle Lock in season 7. I know it was like some season 6, season 7, something like that. But they didn't really get reintroduced until Soto's Legend of the Lost Treasure. That's a very big time gap. But yeah, it's a phenomenal episode. I love the Breakvan crash scene. And I honestly love the interactions between James and Douglas. I think this is a kind of underrated character duo in terms of character pairing rather, in terms of like interactions and whatnot. I think it's really, really good. That could be an episode idea, like underrated character pairings or trios or something like that. I don't know, we'll see. But I just think it's very, very good. And I love that this is the deciding factor on, like, one of the deciding factors on, or what makes Sir Tom Happ think of keeping them on the railway, like both of them, because you already know that he was only supposed to have one of the engines, but 2 of them came. Now we get to the Deputation. The Deputation is my number 14. It's good. It's decent. It's definitely a likable episode. This is of course the episode where Donald and Douglas show their strength by clearing snow, rescuing Henry, and the whole Deputation with Percy. That whole bit's funny. I've always been a fan of that. But other than that, nothing really stuck out. Sucks to say, but I have a feeling people would have this like higher on their list. It's unfortunately not for me. I don't want to say it's a their episode. It's just not as good as the episodes that come before it, at least in terms of my top 10. So yeah, 14 I think is a damn fine place for it. And we'll move on to the next one. Thomas Comes to Breakfast is the next episode, and it is alright. It's number 19 for me. The only thing I'm really a fan of is when Thomas crashes into the house. I've never really been a big fan of the dialogue before it. And of course, this is like the other episode where there's an engine with messed with controls, with Old Iron, the Runaway, and of course this episode. There's a lot of messed up controls this season. I don't know why. It just felt very forced. But this episode definitely did it better than the Runaway. I love the debris, covering Thomas, at least his front. I think it and and then the dialogue, or the way the mother was pissed about her food. I don't know. Just that whole scene was funny, but everything else is just sort of there for me. And I think 19 is a good place to rank it. It's just there in my opinion. Now we have Daisy. This is of course the episode that introduces everybody's favorite character, Billy. Okay, I'll be serious this time. This episode introduces Daisy the Diesel Railcar, and I will say, early Daisy I am a fan of. I love this episode to bits. I've always had a soft spot for this episode. This is my number 6. Like I said, I've always had a soft spot. This is an episode I've always went back to as a kid. I've watched time and time again. Same with my next pick. Same with same with the next episode. We'll get there. But I've always been a fan of this episode. I love Daisy's attitude, and I love her bitchiness towards Annie, Claire, Bill, and Henrietta. And I love the attempts that Percy and Toby try to make to accommodate her. But then, when she actually has to pull something, she like fully loses it. I don't know. It's just a fun episode for me. I love it, and she definitely gets. I don't want to say better later on, but this early version of Daisy is probably one of my favorites, and I love it for that. Now we move on to Percy's Predicament. This is my number one episode of all time. Not of all time, for season 2 at least. I've always been a big fan of this episode. This is my personal favorite. You'd think that like one of the more iconic episodes would be in here as my number one, but no. Percy's Predicament I kind of knew it would be my number one going into this, but yeah, I love it. Everything about this episode is good, like so fucking good. I love the crash sequence, of course. Just the dialogue. The dialogue's perfect. The sets are perfect. Just everything about it is so nice, so intense. I just Percy. This episode really solidified Percy as a favorite character of mine. It's just I just love him to bits. He's like the best little tank engine that we have up until this point. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Number one for me all day. Now we have The Diseasel. Good episode. Really good episode. This is the episode that introduces Boko and kind of the twins. We saw them earlier in Percy Takes the Plunge, but they were supposed to be the unnamed engines that were in the Railway series. They were like taking the place of that, which they could have at least done something. I don't know. I love the way that they were introduced. I love Boko. Bill and Ben were great in this episode, though it is my number 12. I don't know if I mentioned it already. A good episode. I think it's good. Really, really good. Not as good as my top 10. Still good to keep it in my top 15. Very, very nice. I love how Bill and Ben just fuck with Boko, just absolutely nearly destroy him mentally. I thought that was kind of funny. Sounds fucked up, but I thought it was funny. I love this episode, and I'll go back to it quite frequently, but not as frequently as my others. Next, we get to Wrong Road, and this is another banging episode. This is my number 3. I've always been a fan of this episode. As far as I can remember, it might have been like my number 1 at some point when I was younger, but thinking about it now and after watching season 2, at least again, number 3, great ranking. I think it's a phenomenal episode. Night sequences in this episode are really, really good. I love the ambience of it, and I love the and you don't really get a lot of I was gonna say we don't get a lot of human mistakes in the show, at least up until now. Season 2 was full of it. But the whole Gordon's driver mistaking a green hat for a flag waving, I think is perfect. Thought it was funny, and Gordon's face when he comes back, absolutely priceless. Just great episode all around. And the ending with Bill and Ben saying that they're gonna dump Gordon in the sea because they think he's a scrap engine was funny, and Boko coming to his rescue. It was just hilarious. Really solidified Boko as a favorite character for me, honestly. Really, really good. Good shit. Now we have Edward's exploit. I might catch some flack for this. People have this highly ranked, and I understand that. This is my number 11. It's not in my top 10, but I still love the episode. I love the whole opening with fuck what happens in the episode. I just love everything about it, and Edward being like an absolute giga chad when his when that whole fuck shit happens on the line, and it's a lot more graphic and a lot more mature in the Railway series, like by far. And if they were, and they, I would assume they didn't really have the budget to have another Edward, like they didn't. I don't think they had the budget to recreate Edward in that sorry state that he was in, like in the illustrations. But otherwise, it's still a phenomenal episode. He's a true Chad of Sodor and the franchise as a whole. He's not one of my personal favorites. I still love him, don't get me wrong, but in my top 10, I think he's a decent, at least he's in my honorable mentions list as favorite characters. But yeah, number 11 is where I have it. Ghost Train is next, and this is my number 2. I'm a major horror fan, and I think Spooky Thomas episodes are phenomenal. There's not really been one that I've met that I haven't liked. Well, we'll get to an episode if we get to that hit era season. I've always loved this episode. It terrified the fuck out of me as a child, but over the years of gradually becoming a horror fan, it has always been a favorite for me. I love the prank on Thomas. After being such a shithead throughout season 2, it is nice to see him getting his ass handed to him throughout this, and him getting terrified was priceless. And Percy is a real Chad. Toby's a Chad in this episode. I love him so much. Just a phenomenal episode and a great Halloween episode, in my opinion. The first for the franchise and the first of many to come. Phenomenal. Woolly Bear is the second to last episode of season 2, and it is my number 13. It's a good sequel to Ghost Train. I think it's a good follow-up episode. I've always been a big fan of it, though it's not in my top 10. I think it's still a good episode. I've always loved the whole caterpillar, like red caterpillar with red stripes remark. I thought it was always funny, and it's just a good episode nonetheless. I love, Percy being covered in the treacle and the hay. I thought that was good. I would have loved to get a wooden version of it if they were to ever do something like that, which obviously the Wooden Railway Range is no more, but I would have loved to see that. I don't think I could ever pull off doing one of my own personally, but maybe commission someone. I don't know, but otherwise, good episode nonetheless. Love it to bits. Number 13 for me. And finally, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree is next. Unfortunately, it's number 21. I've never really found this episode interesting, and upon rewatching, I know why. As Nick said, it feels like I think it might have been season 1 or 2, but it just doesn't feel complete. Just the episode, it's boring. It's just not a fun episode for me personally. I've never been a fan of it. I don't really remember what happens other than Thomas gets the tree, gets buried in snow, and Donald and Douglas rescue him. That's it. That's all I can tell you. It's just not a fun episode, and honestly, kind of a shame to end it on such a high note. If they were to replace it with a different episode and have maybe like Woolly Bear be the final episode, I wouldn't mind. But this episode is not a good way to end season 2. Like, starting off the season with a not good episode and ending with a not good episode is not really good, at least in my opinion. But that's just me, and that's where I rank it, so eat it. With that being said, season 2 is finally ranked. I might get some flack for my choices. I personally don't care. It's just opinions, People are allowed to have their opinions. Season 2 is definitely a way better season than season 1. But when we get to season 3, like from 3 to about maybe 6 or like 3 to 7, those are seasons I actually enjoy. But there's a lot of phenomenal and iconic episodes in season 2. It's just good. I If I were to if I were to give like actual scores out of like 10 or 5, we'll do 5. I'd give season 1 a 2 out of 5. I'd give season 2 a 2.5 to 3 out of 5, something like that. I don't know, but it's definitely ranking higher than season 1 for sure. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what your top 5 or top 10 episodes of season 2 are. I'd love to hear them. And stay tuned for part 3, where we rank season 3. Goodbye.